You're listening to Autumn on the Air, the weekly podcast that brings you conversations about the impact of research commercialization and the people who make it happen. Join us for interviews with patent and licensing professionals, innovators, entrepreneurs, and tech transfer leaders on the issues and trends that matter most. Keep listening for an inside track on the people, IP policies, and politics changing our world.
Welcome to another episode of Autumn on the Air. Today, we're diving into a topic that resonates with every tech transfer professional: cultivating innovations that industry truly wants. University tech transfer offices are often measured by metrics like the number of licenses executed, but success isn't always about quantity. It's about ensuring that the technologies we bring to the table meet market needs. How can we bridge the gap between groundbreaking research and market readiness? How can we bring industry insights into the process earlier to make sure that our innovations resonate where it matters the most? To help us unpack these questions, I'm thrilled to welcome Kate Havey. Kate is the Assistant Director of Licensing at Venture Partners at CU Boulder and has an impressive background that blends research, teaching, and intellectual property management. Over the years, Kate has worked on technologies ranging from biomedical innovations to EV battery breakthroughs, and she's here to share her insights on aligning university research with industry needs. Kate, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Lisa. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Kate, I thought I'd start the podcast off today with a big picture view. What do you see as the biggest challenge in aligning university innovations with market needs?
I think embracing the concept of customer discovery early in the process is extremely important. I've been doing this tech transfer for about a decade now and have seen it from many perspectives. And I'll say that having these conversations about customer discovery with our innovators early in the process might really be the key to moving these technologies out of our office. The toughest position in tech transfer, I find, is just trying to find a home for technologies that are really innovative and they represent really important improvements of the state of the art. But we find often as tech transfer professionals that industry doesn't really need those improvements or they can't financially support them. And this is especially true in technologies that are not biotech. Industry needs some sort of justification to tear down a manufacturing line, for example, for some small incremental improvement that we may find truly important, but as a pragmatic matter, they just can't take on. So early conversations in customer discovery can inform the approaches to development earlier in the research process.
So, Kate, when you say earlier in the innovation process, how early are you talking?
I find that having conversations before or at the proposal stage is starting to become really important. And as our discussions continue today, I think you'll find that they also have more important aspects of just even relationship building.
So, Kate, from your experience, how do tech transfer offices balance the pressure to increase invention disclosures with ensuring market relevance?
So I think it's important to look at what we're trying to achieve when we talk about increasing the number of invention disclosures. One of the first reasons to solicit invention disclosures, to really go out and try to mine them from our community, is just to increase inventor engagement. If we can encourage more disclosure, we can start to bring more people from across campus into the process. And depending on the programming and the ecosystem that sits within an office, that initial engagement can spur further engagement down the road, and then we'll get more invention disclosures, kind of snowballs, right? But the other reason that we often see is tech transfer offices saying, hey, we're not getting enough licensing numbers. We need to increase our invention disclosures because maybe we'll get more hits on the target. In my experience, this may or may not be true. So any technology that we receive still has to be ready for the market if it's going to get adopted. And so the question really becomes, if we increase these invention disclosures, are we really going to increase adoption? And I'm not sure the numbers bear that out.
So kind of not necessarily if we build it, they will come type of thing.
Correct.
So, Kate, could you share an example of a technology that you felt was particularly innovative, but maybe struggled to find its footing in the market?
Yes, I can. I have a great example, and I'm hoping it's one that everyone will be able to relate to. It's an example of too early for the market, which is something we often say, but I'm not sure that we all understand what it really means. So let me set the stage. Venture Partners licensing team is heavily integrated with our venture development team, and that's a bit unusual. We're a pretty progressive office. I've been in other offices where venture development is separate from licensing. In this case, part of my role as licensing manager is to encourage our researchers, students, and any prospective entrepreneurs through our programming. And some of that programming is supported by the NSF, by the way. We're part of the NSF Hub West. So our entry-level program is called Starting Blocks. And it's a 3-week program of 3 half days on a Friday that dives into customer discovery. So, I've been mentioning this phrase customer discovery. And for anyone not familiar with what that means, customer discovery is the act of going out and asking folks in industry what their pain points are. What's your problem? What keeps you up at night? And the answers to these questions are the basis for innovating a technology that industry actually needs, not an innovation that's groundbreaking that we think they need, but an innovation they actually need now or in the very near future. So our team was tasked with taking a technology through this Starting Blocks program so that we, as licensing managers, could just get a better understanding of what it's like to be in our researchers' shoes, to get a better understanding of that technology and its market adoption space. And I decided to pick a technology that was developed by Dr. Rich Noble, who is one of our emeritus professors, but he's really still active in the research space. And I know all of us have emeritus professors that are sitting in that particular role. So as you can imagine, as an emeritus professor, he was pretty leery of this whole customer discovery concept because that's not how he began his research career and thinking of research in those terms. So the technology itself, just a little bit of understanding here. Rich and his collaborator, Doug Jin, who I'm afraid passed away recently, worked on developing ionic liquids for gas separation. And they're notable experts in this field. We have had people internationally who've been reaching out to Rich even recently. They have very high permeability and they resist aging, which is much better than a membrane that separates gas currently in use in industry. And they can also survive high temperatures. So of course, they present a great opportunity to separate carbon dioxide out of gas streams right at the wellhead or right in a flue. So this is a great opportunity, right? And especially given, the politics of climate change right now. So, adoption seemed obvious to me, to Rich. So we got on the phone with 2 oil and gas research executives at 2 very large oil and gas companies, which I probably shouldn't name, as well as a person at a midstream processor. And we were shocked to hear how uninterested they were. In fact, the response to us was, there's really not a stick big enough yet for us to care. Too expensive for some young engineer to pull down an amine plant and risk his whole career just to, add some technology which might pull carbon dioxide out of the gas streams, even if politics would dictate this is the case. Needless to say, I was pretty jaded. But Rich really kind of drank the Kool-Aid here. He was so excited about this concept of customer discovery that he shifted his focus a bit. And, by the way, 3 years later, we now have at least 6 companies who have reached out to Rich in the last 2 months. I have more conversations, more calls, more agreements I have to do than I can handle at the moment, which is a really great problem to have. And Rich knows how to talk to these folks now. And this is all as a result of this Starting Blocks program. I think I should say that we're really lucky that the market actually changed and policy actually changed such that apparently the stick is big enough now, which is great, not just for this technology, but I think more largely for climate change. But I just want to point out that this little program and the conversations Rich and I had have created a really collaborative relationship between the two of us, that I really feel that there is going to be a market for his technology because he is so invested in helping me find the right partner. And so that's what I mean by customer discovery early in the process. He's even tweaking his liquids and how he's approaching them a little bit. And he is increasing the chances of adoption every time he speaks at these companies. And I just can't say enough good things about starting these conversations early.
That's really an incredible story. And I think another thing that comes to my mind when I hear you tell that story is, actually, maybe it's two things: patience and perseverance.
Yes. And teaching patience and perseverance to our PIs too. A lot about these customer discovery conversations I have found is as much about the relationship building and expectation management with our PIs as it is about the customer discovery itself.
So, Kate, I want to go back to something we touched on just briefly earlier, and that is, how early in the research process do you think market insights should come into play?
So I'll reiterate, I really think about as early as possible. Most of the time when I am trying to compel our PIs to be a part of our Starting Blocks program, my biggest insight for them is that this program might help them in their proposal process. So the program really teaches a mindset and a skill set for asking customer discovery questions, and it provides a logical framework for determining the most ideal people to reach out to in industry also. It's about getting to the right people who can answer your questions about pain points and the decision makers, not just anybody in industry. So it's about efficiently determining the market's actual need. And as you can imagine, if our researchers learn this skill set of figuring out who they need to speak to and what those folks' problems are, that helps them write a great value proposition into their proposal opportunities. So if our PIs want to see these techs used, and they really, really do, then this conversation of customer discovery and figuring out market need really starts at the very beginning of the research process.
So given that, Kate, what are some effective ways you've found to help actually bring customer discovery principles into the early stages of academic research? I know you've mentioned briefly the Starting Blocks program, but I'm assuming you have others as well.
Right. We do. So we have a whole pipeline of programs. I'll add Starting Blocks as the very, very beginning, kind of the starter program, which, leads into successively deeper dives into customer discovery, leading all the way up to pre-accelerator programs. And my colleague, Dano Marshall, who is on a panel about this very topic with me, has a really nice overview of that pipeline. He is our NSF program manager, but also manages some of our other programs. So programs is one way. Justin Anderson, who is at Wharf and is one of the other panelists on this great panel that we're going to be talking about at Autumn National, has a challenge grant program. So Wharf basically invites folks to submit proposals in a very specific tech area that they choose. They bring in industry partners who help review those proposals and provide feedback. And then they fund 2 to 3 PIs about $50K a piece. So it's really bringing that industry perspective into the mix when you're sitting at a very low technology level. So like a TRL3, for example. And it allows them to tweak their ideas, again, toward an area that industry really cares about. I, for my part, have a program called the Translational Research Summit Series that I started at CU. And in that case, it's kind of like an amped up autumn partnering forum where I pick a technology area and I bring together everyone that's in that ecosystem. So I bring together the PIs, I bring together companies, entrepreneurs, investors, policymakers, and we put everybody into one room so that they can meet, so that our PIs can present their research, so that they can get feedback from those companies very early on. And by the way, it has started some discussions about funding that have been really great, not just licensing. We have entrepreneurs that have reached out to those PIs about potentially starting projects and moving IP into a startup in the future. So it's really been a great example of creating relationships that really enable the research continuum from beginning to end and hopefully smooth out some of those bumps to getting some of these technologies in this particular research area adopted. And I've had really great feedback. So again, it's all about conversation. It's all about bringing the people, the stakeholders in the room together rather than just assuming what one stakeholder might need.
So, Kate, given all the time you've spent with researchers, what are some of the common misconceptions they have about what industry wants, and how have you found ways to try and address some of those?
So I think you said it earlier. If I build it, they will come. That the process of tech transfer is as simple as that. And I know we've all heard that from a researcher at one point or another in our careers. And I think it's really important to talk about the fact that universities are here to innovate and to push boundaries. Science is supposed to be imaginative. It's supposed to be passionate and aspirational, and it should be. That's the only way that we move science forward. You don't break through boundaries if you're worried about what people are going to think. Science should be absolutely fearless. But the problem is that industry is not fearless. Industry has to report to its board. Industry is pragmatic. It has to make money for that board. And so industry's view is not necessarily about perfection. I have a great story of someone I know who had a product. It was a particular kind of PC 104 board for data acquisition. And he had a great set of engineers who would engineer the heck out of these boards. And at one point he said, I almost had to fire my engineers because they didn't understand. They kept innovating, but I couldn't make a product. And so we have to realize that that's industry's perspective, but that's not really our researchers' goal. That's not why they join universities. So we as tech transfer people really need to find a way to have these conversations about aspiration versus pragmatism because they're really at odds with each other. And I think having those conversations with our PIs and helping them see the perspective of industry and putting themselves in the industry person's shoes just really helps break through that misconception. And I think the last thing that bears just real emphasis is that this does not happen once. These conversations don't happen once. They happen many times, potentially over the course of years. But I find that the most successful relationships that we build really are based on these ideas of helping our PIs just understand where research fits into industry's goals.
No, those are some really great suggestions, Kate. And, for listeners who might be new to tech transfer, what advice would you give them in terms of how to prioritize the market readiness in their portfolios?
I think having these conversations early with your PIs are important as you get to know people. Having customer discovery or these concepts of letting them know that your job is to help find market fit and you need their help is really important. It helps build relationships going forward. And I also recommend going through some programming if you possibly can, something like that starting blocks program. I can say I know that we do and are happy to accommodate folks in the starting blocks program at CU from other schools too. And so I'm happy to talk to anybody who has any questions about that. And I think it's really also important for early folks in tech transfer to realize that the people part of tech transfer is important. So you're going to have some PIs who have no interest in commercialization. They aren't going to want to be part of this process. And that is really great information for you too. It gives you an idea of who to put your energy into. And those people will sift to the top. Those people who are just passionate about their technology and want to see it adopted will engage in this process. So back to Rich Noble. Rich, who is my professor emeritus, is now become the person who is spreading the message about commercialization in the chemistry department. He is active. He has several junior faculty that he mentors. He is really encouraging them. He sees the benefit. And so that's the last thing is I would say finding those people who can spread the message for you and help do the work for you is critically important.
I think that's a really great point, especially given how many things individuals in tech transfer offices have to work on. So the more help you can get, the better, for sure. All those multiple hats that everyone in tech transfer wears. So, Kate, I wanted to switch gears a little bit and ask you a slightly different question, which is what role does the local innovation ecosystem play in cultivating market-ready technologies?
Oh, that is a great question. And it's one we talk about at CU quite a bit. We really have benefited. We are a flyover state. Make no mistake. We are a flyover state, and those of us in flyover states have a much harder time. We're lucky in Boulder because we're close to the mountains and all kinds of activities that people like to do. And admittedly, COVID, as it did for many cities, created a situation where we had people moving from the coast to Boulder. So there's no question that our ecosystem has grown with investors, with entrepreneurs, with people that are really invested in the startup ecosystem. And to that point, we had 35 startups last year. And for context, CU does not have the research budget as some of our larger institutions that churn out a lot of startups. We have a $742 million research budget, at least FY 23-24. And we don't have the largest patent budget. So on a per dollar basis, we really see a lot of success, quite a lot. And it has to do with this ecosystem. And it has a lot to do with our programming. So I want to be really clear because I don't want to discourage anybody who doesn't have a larger ecosystem. This ecosystem is to our benefit because it makes customer discovery a little more easy access for me. And it certainly makes people who are interested in spinning out techs a little more easy access. But the truth is, they aren't going to be interested or spin anything out if it isn't ready for the market. So that doesn't really offset these conversations we need to have about technologies that the market needs, because they are not going to invest. The investors will not invest. The entrepreneurs will not come for a technology that they cannot spin out and acquire money for and possibly get acquired going forward. All goes back to customer discovery. If that technology is set up to a market need, it will invite the ecosystem.
So share with us, Kate, if you will, how CU Boulder fosters an environment that bridges the gap between research and commercialization.
I've spoken a lot about programming, and I think in our case, that's the key. I think one of the really unique aspects of our office, again, is that we have this integrated, rather progressive office. So I work very closely with our venture development team, and we have programming that further dives into deep customer discovery and entrepreneurism. And even we have a pre-accelerator called Ascent that educates folks on the practical parts of how to build a business. I think that's been key to our licensing success is this programming because, you can de-risk a technology, but you also need to de-risk people in a way when it comes to building a company. They need to be aligned to what a company needs and to business interests. And sometimes that also, by the way, may mean that the PI is not the best person to be CEO. And so we have that conversation quite often. And sometimes in going through this programming, I'll say that's been a little bit of a side benefit that our PIs realize maybe they don't want to be a CEO. So it's made those conversations about finding a CEO a little easier than it might be otherwise. And again, I think all of these interactions and programming, are important, but they really do some more important things than the programming themselves. They build relationships and trust with our PIs. They give our PIs a much better understanding of what it means to spin out a company. And I think it really does give them a little more responsibility and agency in the process. And that has just been such a benefit because every success or failure informs their expectations for how our process works and what industry wants and what makes a startup successful. And as every tech transfer person knows, expectation management is really 85% of this job. And so I think, a long-winded answer there, but I think what we really build is relationships when we take people through this programming and we are aligning relationships with tech transfer.
Yeah, it sounds like a phenomenal program. So congratulations to you and the team there. It really sounds incredible. So Kate, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and pull out your crystal ball for a second and look ahead and tell us what excites you most about the future of university industry partnerships.
Yeah, I think from a research perspective, there are a couple perspectives here. From a research perspective, I see industry, both large and small, large companies, medium companies, startups are starting to be more interested in taking a role in university research at an earlier stage. And we invite those funds, right? We think of the much larger companies starting research projects within universities. They increase research budgets, they offer opportunities for our students, and they provide future relationships for PIs to ask customer discovery questions. And I think we can serve in a nice support role for our PIs in bringing these industry relationships into research. And some of us may even be involved in negotiating some of those research agreements. So some of what I'm talking about here may not be new. I think what I'm saying is I hear an interest in increasing industry involvement in sponsored research. And isn't sponsored research tech transfer? I leave that question to the group, but I believe it is. So I believe it is part of our process. But from a tech transfer perspective, I guess my experience has been in the past, at least, that I have viewed myself as the endpoint in the innovation process. And I think we are starting to shift positions in autumn. I hear folks talking about integrating offices more with the venture team and the licensing team, somewhat more co-located. And I really hope that happens. I think it creates more. It's 1 + 1 = 6, really, when you do that. I think we're in a position to receive innovations and find a home for them much more easily when we do that. And if we look at our job as being available along the whole research continuum, from cradle to launch, I think we see better outcomes. We build deeper relationships with our PIs, and hopefully we'll feel that we're a partner in the successful adoption of their technology rather than an impediment. And I think including our PIs in that process, as I said, makes them feel like they're part of the process, and that's a really great thing. And so, Lisa, I have one last point to make as context for this whole conversation. I hope that what this conversation has highlighted is not only aligning technologies to industry needs, but possibly more importantly, aligning people and relationships with the process of tech transfer more broadly. I'm sure all of these programs sound pretty daunting too. As I've said, I know not every office is as large as ours. I know not every office is integrated as ours is. But I think it's important for folks to keep in mind that Venture Partners in its current iteration, which is the brainchild of Bryn Reese, who is our Associate Vice Chancellor for Innovation, and Marta Zgagic, who is our Senior Director, they started this effort about 7 years ago, reimagining this office. And it really has snowballed in the last 4, adding additional people, a lot of additional people to our team, as well as additional integration between the venture and licensing groups. And so I hope the real takeaway is that the person-to-person conversation you can have with your PIs, just to start aligning them, is the most important thing. And you can do that whether you're in an office that's fully integrated like ours or not. And I think that, it'll help you identify those folks on the research side who are going to help you in those efforts. So we have a panel at Autumn National on this topic with Justin Anderson and Dano Marshall. And I think Justin might be bringing another person into the fold. And it's been a really fun and illuminating discussion. I've learned a lot along the way myself. And I hope that everyone will join us at Autumn National and join in this discussion with us and bring new ways of communicating with our PIs into the fold.
Kate, do you happen to know what day your session will be?
I do not.
I think we're having this conversation a little too early for that. But interested listeners, just watch the schedule as it evolves and you'll be able to find Kate's session, I'm sure, very, very easily. And Kate, thank you so much for sharing all your insights today on aligning university research with industry needs. This has been a really great conversation. Really appreciate all your time.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
That brings us to the end of this episode of Autumn on the Air. Today, we explored the art and science of cultivating innovations that truly resonate with industry. Kate shared some incredible insights about balancing innovation with market readiness, bringing customer discovery principles into research, and fostering ecosystems that bridge the gap between research and commercialization. A huge thank you to Kate for joining us today and sharing her wealth of experience and actionable advice. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to Autumn on the Air and share it with your colleagues. Until next time, keep innovating, keep collaborating, and we'll see you on the next episode of Autumn on the Air.
Thanks for listening to Autumn on the Air with Lisa Mueller. Get social with us and share your thoughts. You can tweet us at AUTM or visit us online at autm.net. We'll be back next week on the air. Be sure to join us.